I'm William K. Black, Associate Professor of Economics and Law at the University of Missouri at Kansas City. I was a senior regulator in a number of different positions during the heart of the savings and loan crisis. On a staff level, I led the re-regulation of the savings and loan industry. The purpose of regulation and effective criminal prosecution is to make sure that cheaters don't prosper, that honest manufacturers win in competition. The primary driver of the current crisis is accounting control fraud. These are frauds led by the CEOs of the major lending institutions and major banks and institutional buyers of toxic waste product. How did it start? It started with mortgages, particularly non-prime mortgages. In September of 2004, the FBI warned that there was an epidemic of mortgage fraud, their words, and that this epidemic of mortgage fraud would cause an economic crisis at least as large as the savings and loan debacle if it wasn't stopped. The FBI found that 80% of the mortgage fraud was being induced by the lenders, not by the borrowers. You know, much of the rage has been against the borrowers, but if you want rage, it should be at the CEOs who became fabulously wealthy by following a strategy based on fraud.
The Wall Street people and their friends here at the Federal Reserve and at the U.S. Treasury and down the Washington Mall here at the U.S. Capitol. That's where the damage was done, and if people want to vent their anger, they need to vent it against these people.
Between the Bush, Paulson administration and the Obama, Summers, Geithner, Volcker administration, there's really a total continuity of economic and financial policy.
Geithner was on board at the Fed, the New York Fed, dealing with all these institutions. He didn't get it. And then we had this fellow who came up afterwards, Mr. Friedman. He was on the Goldman Sachs board, and he didn't last too long as the Fed chairman. Why? Because he had a conflict of interest. Is it possible that there's so much conflict of interest here that all you folks don't even realize that you're helping people that you're associated with, and you should be recusing yourself for America's ethics?
I behaved with the...
You don't think you should have recused yourself when you asked Lehman to go in bankruptcy, you didn't put Bear Stearns in bankruptcy, and then you folded Merrill Lynch into... I mean, isn't there some point where you got to say, hey, I got a conflict of interest here? You don't feel any kind of scintilla of ethics on this thing at all?
Totally. I operated very consistently within the ethic guidelines I had as Secretary of the Treasury, and when it became clear that we had some very significant issues with Goldman Sachs and with
why didn't you recuse yourself
with Morgan Stanley, what I did then, it would have been very wrong for me to recuse myself. What I did was I went and got a waiver from the ethics agreement, because when we had concerns...
Who is in charge of the ethics agreement?
What?
Who's in charge of the ethics agreement that you got a waiver?
We have a Office of Ethics at Treasury, and we have a White House ethics office.
So you got it from the legal counsel from the White House?
We got it from the Government Ethics Office.
So we had Snow, we had Paulson, now we have Geithner. All these people cut from the same bowl of cloth. These are not independent Treasury secretaries. They're part of the problem, not part of any solution. And it would have been nice to see President Obama effect some change in Treasury, but of course, he went and got a Wall Street insider as his Treasury Secretary.
Everything that's speculative, parasitical, cancerous, bloated from all these administrations, going back to Carter and even beyond, comes together in the Obama administration. With Volcker, with Summers, who's part of the economic crimes under Clinton, the guy who brought you derivatives and the abolition of the Glass-Steagall firewall.
You could not have gotten a more perfect setup for a takeover from a previous government, the Bush regime, than the Obama regime. Now, there are some authors out there already saying that it's the same bunch, and it's true. It's the same bankers who put the same boys forward. Obama, far from helping the public and giving them something new or giving them more power and say over their own affairs, has actually sided immediately with the bankers who once again have robbed the public blind, and now they must get bailed out by your tax money.
Obama does it all with left cover. He makes you think that he's somehow different from Bush, that this is somehow benevolent, that he cares about the poor. And in reality, this is the cruelest hoax and the most bogus sham. Obama is 1,000% devoted to Wall Street interests. When Wall Street says jump, Obama jumps. And again, it's about $30 to $40 for the bankers for every dollar that ever reaches an unemployed person or somebody who's on food stamps or some infrastructure building for highways.
The hope with the Obama administration was that it would move us beyond this. But unfortunately, what we're seeing more and more is that Obama has brought in many of the economists who bought into the system in the past. Larry Summers is a very good example. And so many of his economists, many of the people there, you can really almost at this point relate Obama to Hoover, who did something similar in his presidency, as opposed to Franklin Roosevelt, for example, who brought in a very fresh team. So the concern here now is that Obama's falling into this trap of bringing in the same people who put us in the position that we're in today, and other people who buy into the same theories that brought us here, this mutant form of capitalism.
Presumably what most politicians want to come in is say, hey, the problems of the past, they're due to the old guy, and I'm cleaning house, and I'm going to bring in a new team, and don't blame us for the things we've inherited. Can't say, you know, those policies of the past that came before were insane, because you got the guy that was one of the key architects of those policies.
People need to stop having allegiance to their political party. They need to have allegiance to the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and what has made our republic so special. The basic human rights and dignity that every citizen of this country inherently has. Not because it's some right given to us by government, but because our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, enshrines that these are inalienable rights given to us by God, that we inherently have as sentient, free, conscious beings. But instead the public cheers on the Republicans as they win, or cheers on the Democrats as they defeat the Republicans. It's an endless, staged, gladiatorial event, special interest, own both parties, and they project this false left-right paradigm up as like a movie screen. And behind that, behind the throne, the establishment is able to control our society and engineer it into this high-tech police state.